What's up?
Oh,
What's up?
how you doing?
Doing good. We are checking off things off the list
Yeah, me too.
slowly but surely.
I got a
If
podcast after this, so
if people saw my schedule and like they for one would think it's intangible, like they wouldn't be able it's not legible. You can't tell what's going on. And secondly, it's almost it's funny because with if I remember if I think back like 10 years ago or 5 years ago, like organizational skills and the amount of things I'm able to do has escalated to such an extreme level. But
yeah,
you can't just like jump into it like that, you know.
right. Yeah,
You phase your way up to that when you start
you're
to
right.
realize like you
It's
start
like
to
a
realize
boiling frog. So, like, eventually you're just gonna be dead.
it's it's like how on earth do you accomplish so much? But
Yeah, well, I mean, I think too, like, take about your profession and what we do. Like, how many? It's kind of like high school football versus college football versus the NFL. The speed of the game changes as you get through, and it starts to change like as you're moving along. It's like, okay, I remember watching high school football when I was in middle school and being like, damn, that shit's crazy. How
yeah,
how, how am I ever going to do that? And then you get to high school and you're like, well, I mean, it was crazy for a minute, and but then I managed, and then I never made it to college or anything, but I can imagine that there's another step forward. And so then when you get to the NFL and you see like the Tom Brady's of the world play, how many reps have they had? How many opportunities that have they had in a championship environment that's like a certain level of pressure that creates a different level of professionalism in what they
sure.
do. And yours is the
Yep.
same way. So like if you look at it,
Yep.
it's like, okay, when did you start coaching? Were you 20?
Tw- um, yeah, I know. Probably 19
So I
ish.
started at 30.
18, 19. Yeah.
So 18, 19 years old. I don't even know that I could like smack my own ass with my hands at 18, 19 years old, right? And you already know macros and whatever else you had to know to get to that point. And then so then you have all these mistakes. You open a gym, you fuck that up, all the things that makes you sort of pivot and turn and get better. And then you're like, I'm gonna mentor people. And then
Yeah.
everybody's like, hey, Austin, I'm really bad at this. Can I get better? And these are the really fucked up cases that I have. And they
Right.
just put them in your inbox all day long.
Dude.
So
Yeah.
the volume of caseload and the reps that you have, it's like, oh, I know what that is. I know what that is. I know what that is. And you're like, boom, 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 boom. And so your reps, you're Tom Brady. You're you're
Yeah.
you're winning the Super Bowl every day. Like what you're doing is you're elevating everybody else's game while still elevating yours just by happenstance.
100%. Well, yeah, because somebody asked me recently, they're like, well, how do you continue your education? I'm like, well, I go out and pick up little things here and there when I need to, right? Look at some research or do some little things here and there, brush up because it's, and I always said this with like when I first met Dr. Serrano, and I'm like, the dude's forgotten more stuff than I've ever known.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where you get at. Like, I forget things eventually, so I have to go back
Yeah.
and refresh. But to your point, I have all my own client cases, I have everyone else's as well. And so just by virtue of existing,
Well, it's
it's
that, but
like
the other thing too is like you're likable, right? So it'd be one thing if you
usually,
were if you were this guy that was let's take
usually,
the common things that we see is like influencers, like they're yelling about something. They're
yeah,
really very opinionated about one particular
yeah, yeah, yeah.
thing, and that's what all their posts are for like a 2 week period of time. And so nobody wants to deal with that unless you're a crazy person and you're
Right.
like that person. So then that pulls those people that way. And then you
Yep.
have this like vast majority of the valley of coaches or even consumers. And they're like, okay, who's the most logical person here? Who
Right.
who doesn't sound the most insane?
And
And
they
you've
don't
been
go there. They don't always start there though.
no, but what they
The
do
thing is,
is
I'm like step
they
2 or 3.
right. They circle around like
You
they're
know,
on your story and they're on your reels.
they're
And
like,
they're
wait a second,
looking
that makes sense.
for like 6 months, and they're like, "Well, that crazy motherfucker. I liked him because he was so crazy, but this guy keeps making sense. So maybe I need to listen to him a little bit more." And you've
Right.
just been in the space for so long now, and you've been
Yeah.
consistent with who you are that now you're old reliable. So like old reliable, like who do you know that doesn't default to reliable?
Eventually.
Yeah. Eventually you're like,
Eventually.
I'm
Yeah.
so crazy and I need stability. And the only thing that I see that's stable is Austin.
Yeah.
That's what
Eventually.
I see.
Yeah.
Right.
Michelle says hi.
Hey.
Hello, Michelle.
But yeah,
She goes literally. She has defaulted to my stability.
right. 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 Right.
That's funny.
So I think that's part of it. And
Yeah.
I guess that can roll into what we're going to talk
Our
about
topic.
tonight
Yeah.
because this is the problem that I see. And I've had one hell of a year. Two
Yeah.
pro
Lots of this
cards.
on this topic
Yeah,
also.
yeah. Two pro cards. We had a really successful, amateur Olympia. Like we've had some really cool things happen in my coaching career this year. And really in the big scheme of things, like it's been such a short period of time. I
Hmm.
mean, I've been doing it since I was 30, but what I knew between 30 and 35 was nothing. And then the last 3 years is when I opened Foundry, and then it went boom. So it went
Right.
like, okay, Sam Miller gave me this, and then I joined you, and we're similar in a lot of ways. So then it went
Right.
exponentially up from there. And so the learning curve was it was flattened. It was like 15 days to flatten the curve. It was like
Yeah.
15 months to flatten the curve is basically what happened. And
Yeah.
so um, here I am. I've got two ridiculously genetically gifted athletes that probably anybody could coach. Um, if you take the psychological side out of it, right?
Right. Which is
And
part of our topic.
right, right. So you take the psychological side out of it, and you just take the genetics portion of it. Anybody could coach them. Any Joe Schmo could throw macros on a piece of paper and tell them how much cardio to do, what Joe protocol might work. And so I'm fortunate to have two genetic freaks. I got a couple other in the I guess in the bullpen, but nobody knows about them yet. But what I saw happen and what I see happen consistently with competitors is we do really long preps. And there's a couple of reasons why I like to do long preps. One thing is you can't um, you can't dictate what happens with life, right?
Sure.
Like life
Yeah.
gets in the way. So just let's take Ryan Farida for example. We did a 6 month long prep. During that prep, he had COVID. He had, I think he moved. Um, he had ups and downs with relationships in his life. He had job change. All of those things happened within a 6 month period of time. And you're
Right.
in a deficit. And you're expected to be the leanest you've ever been in your life and go compete on the stage for 30 seconds and win a pro card.
Yeah.
So let's don't diminish what it took to get there. And I think that's a lot of mental and emotional energy. And then when you finally get to that and you get the goal, or even if you don't get the goal, Now what do? You've won your pro
Right.
card. You can bask in the glory that's yours. You can get back to work. You can blow it up, whatever you want to do. But ultimately, what I see people do is like they kind of blow it up. They're like, wow, that was a lot. I know I told Kenneth, you know, 3 months into prep that I was going to do a perfect reverse and I was gonna do everything right. But I don't know
Famous
how
final
many
words.
right. I don't know how many times I've had somebody say that to me, and then I have to tell them like, you don't understand what you're getting ready to face.
Right.
Ghrelin is coming for you.
Dude,
it's coming for you, dude.
it's a horror movie about to unfold.
So, and I even like, I was probably front row seat for your prep for nationals last year,
Yeah. Yeah,
and
we stayed pretty in tune with it, I think.
yeah, so I'm
I
watching
didn't
and
want to talk to you, but I still told you because I was like,
well, what's nice though is if you've at least gotten to the point to where he doesn't want to talk to you, that means you matter enough for him to tell you that you don't want to talk to me.
I'll just tell it. I would say that probably.
So anyway, I'm
Uh,
sitting there talking to you and I see you changing. I mean, it was a long prep. What was it like? It was almost 10 months if you really
well,
add
yeah,
it
because it
up.
was unintentional, kind of, right?
Right. Right. And
Yeah.
then I mean, you just suffered until you became an alien. I mean, you were just so conditioned. It was kind of crazy. And then you managed really well out of it, but it's all up here, right? Like that's the other stability part with you that everybody wants is like, how can I be around a stable person that's going to tell me what to do when the chips are down? And so, as a coach, you're remote and you're not living with people day to day. You're not necessarily in life every day. But I will say, with all of my athletes, if you prep with me from 8 weeks out, you're probably talking to me every day on the phone. Not on the phone, but like via text at least. We're manipulating things, or I'm at least like I'm looking at things, looking at variables. So my level of communication is pretty high. However, you managed it really well from what I could see. You're having one of the greatest off seasons I think I've ever seen you have. Like, bravo, by the way.
Still
Um,
learning, man. Always
like
learning.
you're killing it, dude. Like your
Yeah.
pictures are stupid right now. So like when I look at
Yeah.
you,
Yesterday, I looked at not to sidetrack you, I looked at my pictures and I'm like 6 to 8 weeks out.
yeah, and you look like a
I feel
different.
it. I do feel it a little bit.
You
To
look
be honest,
different,
like to be 100% honest. I mean, I can kind of tell, like, okay, not cognitively necessarily, but
right? In
physically.
the
But
gym.
that's different. But a different story. But continue.
Yeah, I mean, I just think at the end of the day, you look really different, and
Yeah.
something changed. And so I have these athletes. I have Paul and I have Ryan. I have Robbie. I have a couple other people that we haven't seen compete yet, who have potential to be great. And I mean, I think you and I both have talked about Ryan. Like he has probably some of the best potential we've seen come along. But from a mental standpoint, that's what we see with a lot of genetically gifted athletes. Like, how do we get the mental to where they're consistent throughout across the board, even after they've prepped into their
Yep.
off season? And I think that's the sticking point for me as a coach. It's like I feel like I've said everything. I feel like I've even set up their diet to where it's not a majorly slow reverse. It's we immediately bump the calories to a pretty good place where it should be satiated.
Yep.
Um, but you have all of these biological signals that are going on and
Yep.
these mental health things that maybe have either surfaced or been caused during prep. What are you doing? Like,
Well, there's a couple good points there. One is I think most of the failures post show have little to do with the plan itself, right? Because even a not so good plan is going to be better than what most people are doing generally. So I think we should first off not, keep in mind that we shouldn't blame the plan. The plan is not the problem. Um, so that's one. The second thing is managing expectations post show too. Understand that it will be hard and you might screw up. And
Yeah,
so
100%.
if you do screw up, you can anyone that's competitive and wants to do good is going to get frustrated. It's going to feel some kind of way, but at the end of the day, you just got to kind of pivot and or just brush it off, and take the next day, right? You
So,
can't
so
have this
vulner
like
for so a moment of vulnerability on your end. You're what, sixth place at nationals. You've had a
seventh
heck of a.
place because if I was six, I would have got the pose. So
That's true. That's true. Sorry, didn't mean
pour
to
that
rub that
salt
in.
in.
Didn't mean to do that. So you're seventh place. You're seventh place at nationals, the best showing you've had. You're depleted beyond belief. I mean, to say that you're cranky is to put it lightly. Like
I'm
you're
dead.
ready.
I'm like a
Yeah,
corpse.
yeah. Like I mean, you were you were hungry for sure.
Yeah.
But you even held composure. I remember sitting across from you at the steakhouse, and I am so fucking starving, and
Remember
I'm
how I
eating
was
that
taking my
steak,
time?
and you were taking your time, and you looked at me, and it was like this, like it was almost like I'm going to say this, and I don't care how offensive it is. It was like I'm better than you, Kenneth, because I am managing my emotions here after I've done more work and put myself through more of a mental battle than you've ever been through in your life, and you can't seem to even chew for longer than 30 seconds. And that's
I
essentially
remember
what
the
you
moment.
said in one fell swoop of like this sentence of like, you gonna chew, Kenneth? It's just like, okay, all right. So in my mind, I'm
Oh.
thinking, all right, to me, and to a lot of people, you kind of got a little like you got a little movie star thing going on right now, right? Like you don't miss. So did you
um,
miss? Did you fuck up?
well, so that's why I said managing expectations, right? What
Right.
is what's my
What
expectation
were
coming
they?
out of the show? And what is my expectation of my clients coming out of the show? And because I've done all but maybe one of the shows, and I've competed probably 13 times ish since 2009. I've done all my own off seasons.
Right.
Okay. So I've had varying degrees of post show stuff. I've tried slower reversing. I've tried da da da. For one, like I have a pretty good grasp on what my body does. I know that I'm really depleted, and even though I'm filling out for the show, I tend to super compensate really well afterwards. So there's no reason for me to sit there and dilly dally around. What I do is if I do have a day, normally I don't so much have an issue with the day to day. It's normally, and this is the same with most people, it's normally an environmental thing. If you put yourself in a situation where you do start eating off the plan, you have that free meal, you start grabbing the snacks, it's fucking free. It's like free
It's
for all
on,
at that
baby.
point,
Yeah, it's
right?
on.
So like that.
Yeah.
So for me, I know if I go to in put myself in certain settings, that it's going to be difficult for me to control my hunger, right? Or my cravings, I should say, because like being physically satiated and psychologically satiated are not even the same things at that point. So, yeah, so there were definitely a few instances, even the last time, where I probably overate too much, but I turned around normally and thought, okay, I'm not satiated. My physical hunger, my physical fullness, and my hunger cues are not matching up. We're going to bump the food. Because for me, I have to have, and everyone really, everyone requires a certain level of body fat to regain homeostasis. It's not just calories,
Right.
right?
Right. Uh-huh.
It is time, and it is actual fat accrual that has to happen to reach that set point. Now the thing that you want to make sure you do is you don't want the fat accrual to go faster than the leptin and ghrelin, because now what's happening is metabolically you're still here, but calorically you're already up here,
Right.
right? And
Right.
that's where we see that kind of like body fat overshooting things start to happen, where you can't stop eating, but you're fat already, right?
Yeah.
so so one of the things that I do too is I do try to leave in, I try to leave in some cardio activity, stuff
Yeah.
like that. For me, I'd much rather, I hate, as much as I hate it, because for one, it's boring, and secondly, it's time. And I just would rather spend the time doing other stuff. But for me, it's super helpful to phase that out very, very slowly and get my food up a lot faster. Um, I also switch my training up normally
Yeah. I was
post
gonna
show
say that
quite a
right
bit.
there is something that like I've recently done because I think, you know, prior to this year, I'll take that back. Prior to a year and a half ago, I don't actually, I'll be really honest. I think at one point in time, I thought I was getting my clients lean, but watching you diet and watching you bring clients in on a consistent basis, it was just like, okay, like well, I'm not at that level. And so um, I remember the first prep that I was going to do, and it was a girl, and I'd never really brought a girl in to like a professional level of conditioning, and it was
Yeah.
Lisa,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Uh-huh.
and so I remember one. I remember it was like this. It's really this strange place that I was in as a coach because here I am. 70% of my clientele is functional health, right? So like I'm babying the situation.
I
I'm like
remember the conversation vividly.
and I'm like, I'm like so like protective over like energy expenditure and like calories and making sure things were healing all the time. Which, by the way, I just want to go on record to say this is my least favorite part of what I do. The health phase, the gut health, all that stuff. I talk about it all the time, but it's my least favorite thing. So everyone that has this preconceived notion that it's my favorite thing and it's all I want to do and I'm just forcing everyone into a health phase because that's what I love. It is not what I love.
I wish I never
I
had to do
exactly, me too. I wish it
it.
never existed. I wish we could just grind people to a pulp and get them shredded and get and win cards. Like that's my thing. But this is a necessary evil because all y'all crazy as hell. So
Right.
now we're having this conversation. I'm like, man, how do you know when to just drop the hammer on this girl? Like, because we gotta drop some body fat. And you were like, now. And
Yeah.
so we went sub
Like,
a
what are you
thousand.
waiting on?
You're right. You're right. Full send. So we dropped sub, it was I think it was even sub 800 calories. And her cardio was up. We were managing stress. We were pulling in and out of the gym, and the finished product was like pro level conditioning. That was the feedback we got from the coach or from the judges. And I remember being like, okay, we can duplicate this on a consistent basis. But it put Lisa in such a grind for so like the sub 800 calories was only for 4 weeks, but all of the activity and everything that we did up until that point was a ton. And then you polish it off with sort of this cherry on top. And then now you have this person who looks great on stage, but mentally they're thinking about a donut
Yeah.
or they're getting ready to jump off the proverbial cliff because they're starving. And
Right.
so now I realize what we do as coaches, we're grinding these people to get them to a conditioning. And as a coach, aside from, you know, bumping their calories when you need to, adjusting their training for their central nervous system, um, what are you doing psychologically? Or is there anything? Is there a conversation that you're having? Because this is the kind of conversation I have with Robbie. And this is the most recent client. So I just said, Robbie, I want you to have a good reverse. and I want you to have some realistic expectations about what's going in to this situation. And she was like, oh, I'm going to nail it. I'm going to nail it. And I was like, mm-mm. You've never dealt with ghrelin like this. Like it's coming for your ass. And
Right.
like when I mean it's coming, like I'm not gonna pussyfoot around. I'm gonna bump your calories up to where it should satiate you, but you're
You're not going
getting
to be
ready,
satiated.
right? And you're getting
You're
ready to go to Australia for 3 weeks, and you're gonna experience all this stuff, and you're telling me you're gonna be 100% on plan? Bull hockey, no way. And so now, granted, she was 85%, and she was like you, and it was like, okay, I screwed up here, but I rebounded here, and it's like once if she screwed up, she fixed it, and if she screwed up again, she fixed it, and we were in conversation sort of along the way. For you, and sort of on that Tom Brady level, what is the conversation you're having with a client? And the other thing too is you might be with some more seasoned athletes too that have dealt with this a little bit more and like had to go through the mental side of it a little bit more.
Sometimes, yeah.
But ultimately, like from the mental side of it, are you doing anything in particular? Anything special?
So like two points there. One is it's super important for anyone that maybe doesn't follow us as much, understanding that the context of those grinds are short, and
100%.
also that we are starting people in a good position in prep. So like that's
100%.
super important to point out. One, we're not
Yeah.
over here just we're not over here just going YOLO with everybody. So,
Yeah.
but
And I tried to articulate that earlier, and it's very important to say, like, listen, we don't do all of this health phase stuff over here to just willy-nilly a person over here.
right,
It's like we're taking care of their health all along the way. So if there was a
yep,
red flag that popped up, we're on top of it, we're jumping all over it. But because we've done all this preliminary work and they're healthy going into prep, we're allowed an allotted amount of time to grind that individual as long as there's certain things supporting it. It's not like, hey, eat, you know, chicken and veggies a couple times a day and good luck. It's not like that. It's
right.
like you have all these other pieces and parts to the puzzle that make it to where we're still sustaining life and we're still allowing the body to respond and they're getting refeeds. It's not like you're just flat calories all across the board.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good
So
point.
one thing that that I do is, and I've tried to get, again, I'm always trying to get better at these conversations because I can see like, all right, this is what I said to this person, but these are the things that didn't work, and so on and so forth. But the the managing expectations thing is super important, but also I always use the screw ups as feedback. I want them to understand why those things are happening and what it tells us about that process. So, for example, if I do have someone, and I'll give you a couple scenarios, I have someone that's kind of resistant on me pushing their calories up quicker, right? That's common. They're fearful of,
Yeah.
especially newer people, right? Fearful of weight regain, etc. So I said, hey, listen, if you're going to have these binges and I'm going to keep your calories low, we're at a net loss, we're basically back in a larger surplus than if we were to increase faster and get you satiated quicker. So like it's important to understand those concepts and then also tell them why it's happening. So like what I said earlier about leptin and ghrelin not rising as quickly as our caloric intakes and our binges and why that's causing fat regain. So all I'm doing is really just taking the emotional component out and trying to, because in their mind, they're like, Coach, I'm screwing up. I'm so mad at myself. I suck. I'm never going to do good at this. Everything's ruined. I'm like, no, 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 listen. This is why this happened. This is a physiological thing that's happening right now. You just went through prep and you didn't screw up. So don't tell me that it's don't tell me that it's just purely psychological because yes, you probably loosen the reins a little bit, but you just did it.
Yeah,
So I want
don't you think it's like so the mental health side of it's like, okay, we close this chapter because the
yep.
game's over.
And
And
this is
so
another piece
now
of it.
what you do is it's like now ghrelin and leptin are on the rise, but those physiological changes are changing the way you're thinking.
Yes.
Because it's like, oh shit, I'm hungry as hell. And I
Yeah.
remember like competing myself. I had tilapia and broccoli for 6 meals a day for 8 weeks. And don't do that. That's not what I'm saying to do, but that's what I did. And ultimately, like, I went white boy wasted on milkshake and cheeseburger and French fries. And it's like overnight I gained 20 pounds of you know water retention and all this other stuff. And psychologically, I wanted to just get back to plan, but I almost couldn't because now I've popped the seal. And so, but I didn't have a coach that was telling me to go ahead and let's bring the calories up because of these physiological changes and how it's affecting my mental health. So
Right.
I guess
And
that's
then
what I'm saying out of that is like it's the conjunction of both. But you're saying to teach them, hey, this is what's happening, so
right.
that they can understand that it's not just them fucking up.
It's kind of like a really easy comparison would be a client updates you and they gain 3 pounds in the week, but earlier in the update they said they started, they're close to their menstrual cycle. It's like, well, you're gonna say you answered your own question. It's right there. You know what I mean? And they understand why those things are happening. But on the psychological side of it, I would also say it's important. Planning is super important because, like you said, I don't want to scare people necessarily, but I want them to understand what is about to occur. So, environmental planning is super important. I'm like, listen, there's things you're going to screw up here, but there's things we need to look at. Where are you screwing up? What environment are you in when you're screwing up? Is it at work? Are people bringing donuts into work? Is that where things are happening? Or is it you going out and having a free meal? Is it food in your house? How can we how can we manipulate these environments that you're screwing up in until those hunger cues start to stabilize? So it's just like any, because it's binge eating. It's just binge eating. If you look at binge eating, it's habitual in the sense that normally with binge eating disorder, outside of people having restriction cycles, there's triggers. That's the word I'm looking for. There's triggers. There's always triggers. So can we eliminate the triggers? Can we like manipulate these environments or get rid of certain triggers to help you do better? I'm not there with you. I can't do that, but there are things we can do. Does that mean that I would absolutely hate people to go on vacation a week after the show? That's an absolutely terrible idea for everyone listening. It's about the worst thing you could do unless you are just like hard as nails, like salt, you know. Um, like I could
Or
do it.
Sid Gillian, the seven
Yeah,
champion Miss Figure, is what she does every year too.
yeah. Like I could do it for sure. But I also understand my body, and I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't have done it 6 or 8 shows ago.
Sure,
But I
100%.
could do it now. But but what I would say is I would prefer not to.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I would prefer not to. Um,
So
and then
let's talk about you. If you're building yourself an environment, well, your environment doesn't change much, but let's just talk about the the reality of how you approach the end of your show. Um, Granted, there were some things that happened along the way that were probably out of the norm, but what I would say is like, how did you set up your days or the first week you were back, and how can that translate to the competitor that maybe doesn't have a coach that's thinking far ahead for themselves, or maybe a coach that's not as seasoned as you are, or even as seasoned as I am? Like, what are some tangible things that you did post show to set up that environment for you?
so one thing that's helpful on the planning side is palatability, or like hyperpalatability is probably your enemy at this point. So understand that hyperpalatable foods are probably going to trigger you. And that could even be macro friendly hyperpalatable foods that you may end up overeating. So
Like peanut butter.
yeah, I mean, there could be a lot of things, right? Anything, maybe anything that tastes good that you haven't had. We'll say that, right? Getting fancy with stuff. So I think that there's probably a level of remaining simplistic, at least for the first week or so you can gauge your level of self control, you know, and then starting to introduce things. So having a meal plan, even having a meal plan versus a macro plan, could be a super useful, a super useful tool for the first week, couple weeks. Post show, introduce some new fruits and veggies, like eat the rice that you haven't been eating, stuff that you're probably less likely to overconsume.
Hmm.
Maybe don't go as crazy with jumping on TikTok and finding every macro friendly recipe you can, right off the rip.
Right.
Um, Second thing is, if you do have free meals in your plan, eat free meals in a controlled environment. I honestly think restaurant free meals are probably better than home free meals.
DoorDash free meals.
Yeah, because here's the problem is there's all kinds of shit around you and not getting an entree, completing the entree. I would rather you have a high calorie entree at a restaurant than try to stay home and control yourself because guess what? It's not going to happen.
Yeah,
And you're
and
going
you
to
know
end up,
what? You and I, you're my coach, and we're going through a little mini cut right now, right? And dropped like 8 pounds last week, which is not normal. I had some digestive issues too, but I had a free meal and I went out at a restaurant and I had a burger with fries and then I had a dessert and then I left. And that was the best case for me because I'm now back in this zone mindset of like, okay, I'm in the game. We've got a goal of what we're going to do. We're going to get out of this phase. We're going to go into the next phase. The next phase is going to last until who knows. And then we know what the goals are from there. So for me, that makes a lot of sense. That resonates with me because if
right.
I'm here, let me tell you what's right down the street. Jenny's ice cream.
Yep.
You ever had Jenny's ice cream? You should.
We
It's an
have
Ohio
Jenny's.
based.
I don't know if
Yeah.
we have, I don't know if we have one local, but yeah.
It's an Ohio based company. So woe be unto you if you like ice cream. It is something else. Well, I can DoorDash, and within 5 minutes, I can have 10 pints of Jenny's ice cream at my door and say to myself, I'm just going to taste it.
Right.
That never happens.
Right. So to that point, if we were to stay home and try to make the macro friendly pizza, it's a really good intention, but
Yeah.
guess what? You're not going to stop.
Yeah, right.
You're not going to stop. I can probably justify having a little bit higher, more calorically dense meal in a controlled environment and leave,
Mhm.
make it the last meal of the day. I'm tired as fuck. I'm so tired that I'm going to go home and go to sleep. And I'm not having, and this might seem like minutia, but dude, if I'm having a free meal at 8 or 9 o'clock, I'm going to go home and go to bed. I'm not doing it at 3 p.m. because I got the rest of the fucking day to screw up, you know? It's
Yeah.
like,
It's like
and
if you
these are,
start at breakfast, you're going to end the night at 12 a.m. down at the hot dog stand, and it's not going to be good.
no. And this isn't even, and dude, we're not even like tapping into what this is going to do to your GI tract and inflammatory environment and hormones. Like, we're not even brushing that. You know what I mean? It's like, this is literally just from an adherence. This is just adherence conversation.
Hmm.
So, you know, and I think as a coach, it's important to understand which of those, like which areas people do tend to deviate in. If it's purely food related, then yes, we can manipulate activity longer to allow to get that food up, and get satiated. It's like we have to consider all of those things. Are they enhanced? Okay. If they're enhanced and we have exogenous thyroid and we have some fat loss supplements and we have all those things, sure as hell probably don't want to yank them all out right away, you know, right?
No, no, you don't. No, you
Right.
don't.
You understanding how to phase things out over time
Yeah.
is going to be an important skill because last thing you want to do is yank all those things out, your metabolism's in the basement, but you're hungry, and you know your
Yeah,
androgen levels drop.
yeah. You're Chris Farley before the day's over.
Oh, dude, it's and the other thing, and I would say one last thing on that too is every person's different. So you need to understand from an individual standpoint what kind of susceptibility to fat regain that you have. Because if you are new and you haven't done it before, you probably aren't going to maintain the same off-season physique as somebody that's very seasoned.
100%. Yeah.
I can every off-season I can maintain a little bit. There's a point where you're not gonna keep getting better, but I can maintain a little bit better spot every
Oh,
time.
I see it this off season.
Right.
Like
You
your
adapt to that.
last off season to this off season, it's almost a night and day thing. It's like I don't know, it's like another level. It's clicked for you or something. But like
Yeah.
even where you hold your fat normally, you're not really holding it there. It's like
And
your
but that's
body's recompositioned.
and it's less again, it's just like understanding those little nuance things over time. But I would like to just circle back to one point that I think is the most important point is that managing expectations is the most important thing, because the problem that I see more often than not is what I said earlier, where when you screw up, you are defeated, and that now a defeated mindset produces more failure. And now you're in a cycle. You start feeling sorry for yourself and you start feeling like you failed because you binged or you had the meal or you went off plan, and listen, if you have a coach that's just ripping you to shreds for that, get a new coach, because you're not gonna
100%.
listen, like that is not going to give you a successful post show period at all.
Hmm.
If my clients screw up, I'm like, all right, what can we do? What should we do? It's
Yeah.
not a you suck, fix it. It's all right, okay, this is what happened. This is what we need to do. This is why it happened. Let's let's make a tweak. Let's continue.
I mean, hell, even, a year into our relationship as coach and client and everything else, I remember being at your house and I was in a major deficit there for a while because we were working on my gut health and stuff, but I was allowed an off plan meal. And I remember I had all my meals and they were in my freezer and it was so cold outside in Ohio that I could just leave my cooler
Cooler
outside
outside.
and it was fine. And so like I would just bring the meals in and I'd eat my meals and we'd sit there and chat and do all the things. And I think Matt was there and we got wings and pizza and cookies. And I remember thinking, man, here I am in front of my coach. I gotta, I can't just go all in on this meal, but I am starving. And I had one cookie and I wanted another cookie. And I like looked over at you and you were like, dude, another cookie is not gonna like ruin you. It's not gonna end everything that we're doing.
Right.
And I remember just thinking, oh, okay. I mean, I know that, but it's really nice to hear from my coach that I'm not just a piece of shit because I wanted two cookies. And I
Right.
think, when you say that about other coaches, maybe they're grinding their client because they made a mistake. Like, what are we doing here?
Right.
Like, that's not beneficial for that person.
You're just about to spiral out of control is all that's going to
100%.
happen. And
Yeah.
what's probably going to happen is they're going to stop telling you, and they're going to keep doing the shit on their own. And then maybe
Yes.
you find out later, maybe you don't. Or guess what? They'll just stop coaching. They'll just like stop coaching altogether and just completely fall off.
You're 100%
And
right.
and then what? Like what have we accomplished there?
Nothing.
So, and there's levels, of course. There are levels. Like I can't just it's just not free reign. There does come a point where you have to give people a
Have the
little bit of
hard
reality
conversations.
checks.
Yes.
And I go like, hey, like we gotta reel this in, but it's not every update just belittling and beating your client to death psychologically.
And that's
Because
something that you've done really well too. Like there's been plenty of times where I've been a complete jackass, and that's funny probably for people to hear that a coach is being a jackass in their own plan. but I'm human just like anybody else, and there's factors in my life that have derailed things, us as coach and client. And I think there was at one point we were working together and we had made some serious changes in about an 8 week period of time with my first gut protocol. And I just had some stuff happen over the holidays. And I think you, you responded with, if you're not careful, you're going to undo all the hard work we've done for the last 8 weeks. I'm pulling you out of the gym and you need to get your shit together. That's what she said to me. And I remember thinking, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I was like, I will not screw this up. But it was like it was like one of the first reality checks. And then what was really nice, it was after that week, I like rebounded and did really well. And you responded with, dude, if that happened to me, I probably would have been at the Chinese restaurant buffet, slamming tons of food and like picking up the waitress to take her home. And so like it was like you're joking around at the fact that like what I went through was significant, and the fact that I did misbehave mattered because it's impeding our process. But I did rebound and I was successful to get back to where we needed me to be. And then you were like, it's okay. Like you held me accountable, but also it wasn't just an iron fist completely. It was like, I recognize who you are. You're a human. I probably would have done something worse. And that was nice because it was like, wow, okay, Austin's human too. But that was
Right.
early on in our relationship.
Yeah. And so humanizing that process is important, but also, it's just two prongs, right? It's like you got to have just the right amount of understanding and empathy and sympathy for the process, but you also have to not give too much emotion, because the last thing I want to do is, it's just like, dude, it's just like prep and anything else. There's a reason that I don't hype the living shit out of everything, because clients feel that,
Yeah.
right? Everything you give, and it's not to say that I don't congratulate people and motivate the clients and give encouragement, but there's a fine line there, right? There's a fine line, and it's more for some people than others. It depends. I give you less because
Because I can
that's
take
how it works for us. You know, it
it.
works.
You know what?
That
Here's the
works.
thing. I had one other coach. He's a close friend of mine. His name is Patrick, and he never gave out compliments ever, ever. And so when I started working with you, we had just started going through this gut protocol and we were training together, and I stripped down and do some poses, and he gave me a compliment for the first time in my life. And I remember like I needed to capture that compliment and store it and like post it on my wall. And you're kind of in that same vein. It's like if there's ever a day where I send a check-in photo and you're like looking good, I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, because that means I do. You know what I mean? But like, man, it's slim pickings over here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to live with what you give
Yeah.
me.
But the thing is, that's because your goal is to body build, and your
Yes,
goal is to be the best version of you that you can be.
right.
I'm not. I'm gonna have to give soccer mom Jill some extra compliments. Like I will, right? It's, dude, I could, it's, the approach is vastly different in terms of encouragement from person to person. But the one thing that remains the same on every person is that I'm never going to feed into that negative, into any of those
100%.
negative emotions. You
Right.
know, it's not that I'm ignoring it. It's not that I'm like ignoring what you're saying. It's just that if I acknowledge it and start feeding into that, it's never going to make the process better. It's like a group of friends. You have a friend group and you're pissed off and you're like, yeah, fuck them. And they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, what do you think's going to happen?
You're burning the building down next.
Right. Exactly. So like,
Yeah.
why am I going to feed into all these negative cycles and habits and emotions, and rather I'm going to figure out how we can make it better and highlight some positives
Yeah.
that are going on, and we're going to get better. It's prep is the same way, man. Like I don't think, I really just genuinely don't think outside of select circumstances that you should just be hyping the living shit out of people the whole entire time, because what happens when they have a bad day?
Hmm.
Then what? They're going
Yeah.
to be like, what do I do? Like, how do I handle this?
Right.
You know?
You're right. You're right.
So stability, right? You said it at the very beginning. So everything comes full circle here. It's like that stability piece is super important, dude. It's literally everything in every part of the coaching process is just, if you're a coach and you can't be stable, logical, and understand how to kind of, you know,
Navigate things.
navigate emotions,
Hmm.
you're going to just feed into all these cycles with the client. You're going to either get mad when they get mad, you're going to be upset when they're frustrated, you're going to be overly excited when they're overly excited,
Yep.
instead of providing a like nice stable environment. Because let's face it, probably half or more of the population that we have are basically manic depressives.
You're right.
You
You're
know,
exactly right. You're
we are
exactly
all
right.
we're all doing this shit all the time.
Hmm.
It's like, give me all the dopamine, crash and burn. You know,
Yeah.
it's like we
I mean,
can't just
that.
can't just yeah, Matt,
See what Matt just said?
you missed it. It's over.
So I think you're right. I mean, I think um, hopefully, like what I want people to know, whether they're our client or whether they're someone else's or they're just doing things themselves, is like, how can you provide yourself stability in your own environment once you get home? And like, I think that requires self-awareness, right? And it's like a lot of the time when I'm working with competitors is that's really the aspect that I'm coaching on them on, is like, how do we bring this level of self-awareness up so that I don't have to talk to you every single day, or like you can start to think like, okay, what would Kenneth have me do in this situation? What's best for me for my goal in this particular area that I'm getting ready to make a decision in? It's like disconnecting from the emotions or the physiological response just enough to say, okay, I know I struggle when I have Oreos in the cabinet. I know that I can't keep ice cream in the freezer. Then let's make sure you don't do that. And then like the other thing that I see that happens is like people get out of the routine altogether. So instead of like
Can't do that.
when you go to bed at 9 o'clock every night for prep because you've got to be up at 5 a.m. to do your
To do your
cardio
cardio.
before you go do work, and then you've got to train later, and you've literally built the last 6 months on this routine, and then all of a sudden, because I gave you a week off from training, and then we've pulled back on some various different things, you're like, well, fuck it, I'm on vacation now. I'm going to go to bed at 12. I'm still going to get up at 5 because I'm neurotic, and I'm going to still do my cardio, but I'm going to do more than you told me to. And then it's just this whole like
Yeah.
just stay steady. And how do you know, I think that's the challenge, is like, how do you create stability for yourself, but also as a coach, how do you know your client well enough to create a stable environment so that they can be more successful
Yeah.
reversing out or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, and I think that's a really great takeaway right there too, is just nothing physiologically changes that quick. So don't change what you're doing. You
Mhm.
know, just if that means that for the first 2 months after the show that you need to keep going to bed at 9 and keep getting up at 5, even as your cardio starts reducing, that's okay.
Yeah.
Phase yourself out of it, because I'm telling you, 6 months after that, you're going to be in a vastly different, position. But that's with anything bodybuilding related or physique enhancement in general. It's just that routine is, routine is everything. You can't, consistency and routine, you can't be a part-timer. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you can't just, and that's why people get in trouble in prep and post show, is because they're like, okay, prep time, I'm going to change everything about my life and my day because now I'm in prep. Off season time, I'm going to change everything about my day and my life because I'm off season. I'm like, dude, the only thing that's changing is the like amount of food that you're
Yeah.
eating. You're
Yeah.
doing, why are you not doing the same stuff
Yeah. You're the
largely?
most routine person that I know. Like I can probably time my watch. It's like, okay, it's 6:30. He's probably getting ready to make a post. He just got up a little
I
bit ago.
schedule, I schedule those they're
Okay,
already
but
they're
you know what I mean?
pre-scheduled.
Like it's like there's a
Yeah.
routine there that I see, but I also know you as a human being. Like I know when you're going to go to the gym. I could hunt you down and kill you if I wanted to,
Sure.
because I know exactly where you're going to be. But at the end of the day, I think the last takeaway, because I know you've got a call and stuff. Um, you know, how long did it take for your central nervous system to come back in training?
Good question. It took me, I would say at least at least 3 to 4 months
Okay.
before I didn't even, so I'll say this, I didn't even touch mechanical failure, where the weight stops moving in a set type of failure, let alone add in anything super intensive until about 3 months post show.
Yes. So I want you to repeat that. 3 to 4 months post show, your central nervous system didn't get back to normal until then.
And that's a
Because
good, and that's
when
a
I say
good
that to
outcome.
people, they don't believe me. I
Yeah,
know I was thinking more six in certain cases, depending on the
probably.
person,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
I
So,
mean,
like, when I
probably.
tell people, like, I want you to take it easy in the gym, they don't. And it's like, you're doing more harm than good at this point. So,
Yep.
I don't know. It's,
And how much stimulus, and the last thing there, I mean, how much stimulus does it take to grow when you're like weak and underfed? Just putting food back in and gaining body weight.
just
I
insulin
literally,
sensitivity by
dude,
itself.
I literally did like nothing but supersets and shit at basically just purely metabolic training, probably for the first 3 months post show. And I got stronger every single workout without ever touching failure because I was fucking like a dead fetal kitten by the end of the prep. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a clip that you need to save and post later.
Yeah.
The dead fetal
Perfect.
kitten.
Yeah.
Well, I
But
appreciate the talk.
yeah, cool, man. Thanks for coming on. I'll repost and tag you and stuff.
Yeah, just put me as a collaborator or something would be cool.
Cool. Well, I
Cool.
will do that. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, brother. Bye.
Later, guys.